When we talk about self-love, the first reaction many people have is resistance. There is a cultural suspicion around it, as if to love yourself is to put yourself on a pedestal above others. We have been conditioned to think of self-love as selfishness, as vanity, as the inflated ego that isolates us from real connection. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. The essence of self-love is not arrogance, it is acceptance. It is not about elevating yourself above others, but about finally meeting yourself on equal terms. It is about the radical act of saying, I am worthy, I am enough, and I do not need to apologize for existing as I am. When you strip away the stigma, you realize that self-love is not only healthy, it is necessary. Think of it like the roots of a tree. If the roots are weak, if they are neglected or poisoned, the tree cannot grow tall, it cannot bear fruit, it cannot offer shade to anyone. But when the roots are nourished, the tree flourishes and everything around it benefits. In the same way, when we neglect ourselves, when we run from our insecurities and silence our needs, we are like that tree with shallow roots. We might stand for a while, but under the weight of life and relationships, we bend, we break, and we collapse into resentment. Philosophers and psychologists alike have long understood that the human need for love begins within. Erich Fromm, in his classic work, The Art of Loving, insisted that love of others and love of self are not opposites, but inseparable. If I cannot embrace myself, then every attempt to love someone else becomes an attempt to fill a void rather than to share abundance. It becomes a negotiation, not a gift. And that is why so many relationships fail, not because love is lacking, but because self-love is absent. We must also recognize that true self-love is not indulgence. It does not mean ignoring flaws or excusing harmful behavior. Rather, it is the courage to look in the mirror with honesty and compassion, to hold space for both our brilliance and our brokenness. It is to say, I will not abandon myself, even when I stumble. That kind of love is powerful because it breeds resilience. It allows us to move through life not in fear of rejection, but in the knowledge that even in the face of loss, we remain whole. And so when people ask, isn't self-love selfish? I always turn the question around, how can it be selfish to build a foundation from which all love flows? If I cannot love myself, then my love for you will always come with conditions. But when I am at peace within, then my love for you is free, unburdened, and true. Self-love, then, is not the enemy of love. It is its beginning. Without it, every other form of love becomes fragile, insecure, and temporary. With it, love becomes expansive, generous, and enduring. The question we should ask ourselves is not, what will happen if I love myself? But rather, what will I lose if I don't? One of the deepest misconceptions we carry into our relationships is the idea that another person will complete us. It sounds poetic, even romantic, the notion that somewhere out there exists the missing piece to our puzzle, the other half of our soul. But if we look at it closely, it is also a dangerous illusion, because to enter a relationship from a place of emptiness is to hand over our wholeness to someone else. It is to say, I am not enough on my own, make me whole. And no human being, no matter how loving or devoted, can carry that burden forever. When love becomes a quest for completion, it quickly turns into dependency. The partner stops being a companion and becomes a lifeline. Their approval becomes oxygen, their attention becomes food, their presence becomes survival. And what begins as passion often deteriorates into fear. The fear of losing the person who holds the key to your worth. This isn't love, it's possession. It is an attempt to patch our own emptiness with the fabric of someone else's existence. The truth is that genuine love can only emerge when we arrive as complete individuals. Not flawless, not perfect, but whole enough to stand on our own. Fulfillment must exist within us before it can be shared with another, because love is not about two halves making a whole, it is about two wholes choosing to walk together. When both people know they are enough, love becomes a celebration, not a negotiation. Psychology teaches us that people who rely on others for self-worth often fall into cycles of anxiety and insecurity. Every silence becomes a threat. Every disagreement feels like rejection. Instead of growing in love, they shrink in fear. But when we cultivate our own inner fulfillment, when we know we are already valuable, already worthy, we remove the weight of expectation from the relationship. We stop asking someone else to fix the parts of us we have neglected. And this freedom allows love to breathe. Think of two candles. If one is unlit, it may lean on the other, trying to steal its flame, but it will always remain dependent. But if both candles burn brightly on their own, when they come together, they don't diminish one another. They create more light, more warmth, more radiance for the world around them. That is what fulfillment within ourselves allows. It makes love additive, not compensatory. This doesn't mean we stop needing others. Human connection is still vital, but there is a profound difference between needing from emptiness and choosing from wholeness. In the first, love is a survival mechanism. In the second, it is a gift freely given. And isn't that what makes love beautiful? Not that it fills a hole inside us, but that it multiplies the joy we already carry. So the challenge is this: before we ask someone else to complete us, can we ask ourselves, have I learned to complete myself? Because when we enter love whole, we give the most precious gift of all. Not our desperation, but our abundance. One of the most overlooked expressions of love is the ability to set boundaries. We tend to associate love with openness, with giving endlessly, with being available at all times. But when love becomes limitless in that way, it stops being healthy and starts becoming self-erasure. To love without boundaries is to dissolve yourself in the name of connection, and that is not love. That is sacrifice of the self. True love, whether for ourselves or others, requires limits, not because we want less connection, but because we want connection that is real, sustainable, and respectful. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls. People think they are barriers that shut others out. But they are not walls, they are doors. A door defines the threshold between what is inside and what is outside, between what belongs to me and what belongs to you. Without that clarity, relationships become blurred, chaotic, and filled with silent resentments. When we articulate our needs and limits, we are not pushing people away. We are inviting them to know us more fully. We are saying, this is who I am, this is what I can give, and this is what I cannot. That is not rejection, that is honesty. Psychologists have long emphasized that boundaries are an essential component of emotional intelligence. They protect our sense of self and ensure that we are not constantly drained or manipulated. But more than that, they allow love to thrive, because without boundaries, love is unsustainable. It burns too quickly. It demands too much. It turns into a cycle of guilt, overextension, and eventual collapse. Boundaries give love structure. They allow both people to breathe within the relationship instead of suffocating under the weight of endless demands. And there is something profoundly empowering about a love that exists with boundaries. It signals respect. When I respect myself enough to say no, and when you respect me enough to honor that no, our bond deepens rather than weakens. We trust each other more because we know we are not pretending. We know the affection between us is not based on fear or submission, but on choice. In that sense, boundaries are not restrictions. They are freedoms. They free us from resentment, from confusion, and from the slow erosion of identity that comes from always saying yes when we mean no. Think about it this way. If a garden has no fences, anything can trample through and soon the flowers wither. But if you create a gentle boundary, you protect what is sacred and those who enter do so with care. Love works in exactly the same way. By defining where we end and where someone else begins, we protect the integrity of both selves. And when two people come together from that place, what they build is stronger because it is rooted in respect, not in overreach. So let us remember boundaries are not the end of love, they are the beginning of it. For love that has no edges is not love at all, it is absorption. And the love worth striving for is not the kind that consumes us, but the kind that sustains us. One of the most profound truths about love is that our ability to accept others is always limited by our ability to accept ourselves. We often imagine that love for others is an entirely separate act, as though I can treat you with compassion while continuing to treat myself with criticism and disdain. But human psychology doesn't work that way. If the voice inside me is harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving, then sooner or later, that same harshness will bleed into my relationships. The world becomes a mirror, and I begin to see in others the very flaws I cannot tolerate in myself. This is why self-acceptance is not indulgence. It is a practice of humility. To accept yourself doesn't mean you believe you are perfect. It means you are willing to look at the parts of you that are broken, complicated, or unfinished and hold them with compassion. It is choosing to say, yes, I have flaws. Yes, I make mistakes, but I am still worthy of love. That act of kindness toward yourself creates the template for how you treat others. Because once you learn to live with your own imperfection, you no longer demand perfection from anyone else. Think about the way we react when we're most insecure. We project, we criticize, we measure others against impossible standards because we are quietly measuring ourselves the same way. But when we learn to soften that inner voice, when we learn to embrace the fact that being human means being incomplete, then suddenly we find ourselves more patient, more empathetic, more forgiving with those around us. Self-acceptance becomes the foundation of compassion. There is also a deeper philosophical truth here. The acceptance of self is what allows love to be unconditional. If I reject parts of myself, then my love for you is likely to come with conditions as well. I will love you if you don't remind me of the things I dislike in myself. I will love you as long as you don't mirror back my hidden shame. But if I have already faced my own shadows, if I have embraced my vulnerability as part of my humanity, then I can embrace yours too. I no longer need you to be flawless for me to feel safe in loving you. And perhaps this is where real intimacy begins. Not in the performance of perfection, but in the courage to show up as we are. When we meet each other with the gentleness we have cultivated for ourselves, relationships stop being battlegrounds for validation and start becoming sanctuaries for authenticity. We allow others to breathe, to be human, to stumble, to grow, because we have learned to allow that same space within our own hearts. So the task before us is simple, though not easy, to practice self-acceptance, not as a way of excusing ourselves from growth, but as a way of grounding that growth in love rather than shame. For in the end, we cannot give to others what we have not first given to ourselves. And if we wish to love fully, we must begin by learning how to stay tender with our own imperfect souls. The way we love others is never separate from the way we love ourselves. Love, in many ways, is a mirror. It reflects back to us the quality of our inner world. If we live in constant self-criticism, if we starve ourselves of kindness, we will inevitably extend that scarcity to those around us. If our inner dialogue is filled with impatience and judgment, then our relationships will carry that same harshness, no matter how much we try to mask it. But if we cultivate tenderness within, if we learn the language of respect and compassion toward ourselves, then that energy naturally spills outward. Love becomes not just an act, but a state of being. It is tempting to think of love as something external, something that happens between two people as though it exists outside of us. But the truth is that love always begins internally. The way I show up in a relationship, whether with a partner, a friend, or a family member, emerges from the way I have been showing up for myself. If I have been neglectful of my needs, I am more likely to resent yours. If I have silenced my emotions, I will struggle to honor yours. And if I have denied my own worth, I will doubt yours as well. Psychologists often describe this as projection. We place onto others the beliefs we secretly hold about ourselves. If I believe I am unworthy of love, I will constantly suspect that you don't really love me. If I believe my flaws make me unlovable, I will search for flaws in you to balance the equation. But when I believe in my own worth, when I accept that love is not earned through perfection, but given through presence, then I can extend that same belief to you. My love becomes generous, forgiving, and secure because it reflects an inner landscape that is already at peace. This is why cultivating inner love is not a selfish act, but a profoundly relational one. It transforms the way we engage with every person we encounter. Instead of love that clings, we offer love that liberates. Instead of love that demands, we create love that gives. Our relationships stop being mirrors of our fear and become mirrors of our wholeness. And people feel it. They feel when your love is rooted not in desperation, but in abundance. They feel when you are not asking them to fix you, but inviting them to walk beside you. The philosopher Rumi once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." When we heal those wounds with self-love, the light doesn't just stay within us, it radiates outward. And in that light, others find safety, others find inspiration, others find permission to love themselves too. So when you think about the love you are offering the world, ask yourself, is it a reflection of scarcity or is it a reflection of abundance? Because the answer to that question will shape not just your relationships, but the legacy of love you leave behind. When we think about love, we often think in personal terms. Our relationships, our partners, our families. But the truth is that love never exists in isolation. It always ripples outward. Every act of love or lack of love becomes part of a larger legacy that shapes the world around us. And this is where self-love takes on its greatest significance. Because when we love ourselves, we don't just transform our own lives, we set in motion a chain reaction that impacts everyone who crosses our path. Children, for example, do not learn love from abstract ideas. They learn it from what they see modeled. If they see a parent or mentor who constantly diminishes themselves, who confuses sacrifice with love and erasure with devotion, they grow up believing that love requires the abandonment of self. But if they see someone who treats themselves with dignity, who protects their boundaries, who embraces their own humanity with compassion, then they learn that love is not about depletion, but about wholeness. They carry that lesson forward, shaping not only their own lives, but the lives of those they will one day love. The same is true in friendships, workplaces, and communities. A person who practices self-love radiates a quiet strength. They don't need to dominate to feel secure, nor do they collapse under pressure to please. Their presence creates balance. People around them feel freer, safer, more authentic, because they are no longer caught in the web of someone else's unresolved wounds. In this way, self-love becomes more than a private practice. It becomes a public service. Philosophically, this connects to the idea of legacy. Legacy is not only what we achieve, but what we inspire and the love we model. Whether conditional or unconditional, rooted in insecurity or grounded in self-acceptance, will echo far beyond us. The most enduring legacies are not measured in possessions or accomplishments, but in the way people remember how they felt in our presence. Did we create love that expanded them, or love that diminished them? That answer depends largely on the love we first cultivated within ourselves. And here lies a deeper responsibility. To love ourselves is not merely a personal preference, it is an ethical choice. Because when we neglect ourselves, when we allow fear, shame, or self-hatred to govern us, we don't just hurt ourselves, we pass that pain outward, often unconsciously. But when we choose self-love, we interrupt that cycle. We break patterns of dependency, manipulation, and conditionality. We create new models of love that are freer, healthier, and more empowering for everyone. In the end, the question is not just how do I love myself, but what kind of love will my life leave behind? Because every choice we make, every act of self-acceptance or self-abandonment contributes to that legacy. And when self-love becomes the foundation of all love, the legacy we leave is one of abundance, not scarcity, of freedom, not fear. So let us choose to love ourselves, not only for our own sake, but for the generations who will learn what love means by watching us live it. For in loving ourselves fully, we give the world permission to do the same.